When you don't take time to look at it through other people's eyes. Take some time and reflect on what you believe in your soul. Cause that is the key to life. You gotta let the negativity go.
Hello and welcome back to the What the Fox podcast with your hosts, Lindsey Fox and Amber Ross. Today, we have a wonderful guest with us here celebrating Pride Month with our topic today of come out wherever you are, or I'm coming out. Lauren, welcome. We're thrilled to have you. For those who don't know, Lauren and Lindsey met in college. And I personally don't have a lot of those details, but I am certain there are so many fun stories. So Lindsey, you want to introduce our friend Lauren?
I would be more than happy to. And it's still so weird to call you Lauren. Well, we'll start with what we know. We know that Lauren Diaz Clark is a social worker by trade, and she's very well known in her local community, which is centered around the Wilmington area of North Carolina. But that's not where she is from originally. She is from New York. And we are going to definitely kind of see how the cultural aspects of living in New York and weaving that in through her transition to North Carolina kind of comes full circle. But in terms of what does Lauren do for work and kind of how that all blends together, we will also see how that unfolds in today's episode. So
All
she
the things.
works. Yeah, all the things. So Lauren works as the care management program director at a large nonprofit in North Carolina that provides an array of behavioral health and integrated care services. And she's very much a resiliency educator. We like those people. On the board, she's also on the board of the directors for a small arts-based charter school, mom of two, a runner, and a proud newly out member of the LGBTQIA community. So welcome,
Woo-woo.
Lauren Diaz. Diaz Clark.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thanks so much for having me. I'm just a fan. So excited to get to hang out and chat with you guys.
I'm so happy to have you. I should probably preface why I'm sorry for our listeners who don't know the story. I know Lauren as Ty because I birthed her with that name many, many moons ago. And so it's odd for me to introduce her by her actual name.
Yeah. I went to college with red hair because I had dyed it for a show. Couldn't find a good wig. So I just dye your hair then. So went to college and kept it with red hair. And so Ty from Clueless, Lindsey decided to impart that name on me. And so it's weird just to even hear her say Lauren. So
Yeah.
Ty, you know, I love it. I love it.
And everyone else calls her Lauren still. So I might just say Ty by accident through this recording, but she gets it. She understands. We're on the same wavelength.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, Lauren, super thrilled to have you join us today. I'm excited to hear your story, excited to hear just what you would like to share with us. And Lindsey, I think you had an idea of kind of where you want to start the conversation.
definitely.
Take it away.
Right. That's what we do. We don't really plan this so much, but what I will say is that we ask our listeners to kind of reflect on a few key questions, not because we ask them directly within the recording process, but we just want them to start to reflect on what their journey looks like. And when I was reviewing Lauren's responses,
You've got this. You can
I
do
got
it.
it. I'm trying. So whenever I was reviewing Lauren's responses, I asked her like what was kind of the big takeaway for her that she wants the audience to get out of this. And she shared a quote, and I want to start by sharing the quote, and then we kind of move from there. The quote is, "When we recover loudly, we keep others from dying quietly." Wow. Wow. So I didn't want us to end the conversation with that quote. I feel like that's where we should start the conversation.
Yes.
What does that mean to you, Lauren?
I'm getting all the feels just hearing it and knowing, you know, the dear person who sent it and just that feeling of support. You know, I feel like a lack of conversation, a lack of representation in many areas. So not just by coming out or being a part of the LGBTQ community, behavioral health in general, challenges. We don't talk about the hard things. I think you guys talked about it in one of your previous episodes too, right? Like, let's have those hard conversations. It can be so isolating to think that you're alone. Or we have stereotypes of what we expect a certain person to look like, a certain person within a community to act like, to look like. And if we don't fit that, it can be so easy to question ourselves. And so I just feel more compelled to say, hey, this has happened. This happened to me. And I feel like I'm doing really well now, but what could have happened if I had seen that representation earlier? How could that have changed maybe some of the challenges I did experience? And I just want to open people's eyes, maybe to question or consider things going on for them inside, but also to have other people question and look at the people around them and maybe view people in a more empathetic way, a more open, compassionate way.
Yeah.
So here we go. We're going big or going home here.
I love it. Because this is really, I mean, just so our listeners understand the gravity of having Lauren here today, this is really your first public outing, so to speak. Is that right?
That is correct. So immediate close friends and family are aware, but
now we're making a splash, friend. I love that. And thank you for choosing this platform and like our space as your safe space to be able to do that. I think that makes my heart happy.
And hella admirable. I'm so proud of you on so many levels. I just want to like love you. I'm just so proud of you because this takes so much courage to come out, and then to hear kind of like some of the motivation behind it is like you're saying, I didn't have that representation for myself, which in some ways I find so interesting because you are from New York and I know you as like this Broadway girl who was like always all about theater and doing different shows and, you know, bebopping, and had your like fashionista little like unique quirkiness about you that is just adorable and has always been that way. And actually, I just want to comment that I'm seeing more of that come out in you now in a more authentic way, which I think is beautiful. Yeah. So can you say a little bit about the lack of representation that was there beforehand and what those social norms looked like? You know, what did your upbringing look like in your exposure in terms of what was expected or normal in your eyes?
Yeah, I grew up, Disney princess was the world. Like I was the target audience for Ariel and Belle and Cinderella and just that entire Disney princess world. And I adored it all. I adored the magic and the fantasy of it all. So that, right, you're trying to find your Prince Charming. And I love, by the way, that Rebel Wilson just came out and said that she was actually looking maybe for her Princess Charming, because I'm like, I get you. I understand that so much. Right, exactly.
I'm like getting goosebumps.
So, it's so cool. So that was really the world I grew up in. My family, we didn't have anybody who was out. It wasn't, say, a non-supportive family. They were loving to all people, really welcoming, but I didn't have any friends or family immediately to look to. And then I was in the theater world once I got older into high school, but who I saw was primarily males who were openly gay. So I didn't see a lot of representation of women in our queer community. I just really didn't, for whatever the reason was. And looking back, things just that wasn't that long ago. But this next generation, it's amazing to see that slight step and that slight change, because coming out to my younger cousins was like, okay, cool. Like, you be you. Are we going to Pride together? Like, it was just such a different reaction and interaction. So yeah, I was kind of in that world, and yet I still had just stereotypes that I don't think I was alone to have, that you had to have short hair if you were a female, loving female, right? Like you had to have this short kind of hair, maybe wear lots of flannels that weren't super, you know, fitting, or wear t-shirts, or you had to be super into sports, or just something that just didn't resonate with me in a way that felt okay. And then there was no conversation. I didn't even know that you could be interested in women and also want a marriage and a
Mm.
family
And have
and
kids.
kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did not know that picture was allowed. So I think back, I always envisioned a wedding wearing a white suit backwards with the low back, like talking about fat. Like I was gonna wear this white suit.
Oh, I
to a
love
wedding.
that.
I mean, so fun. But I never pictured a person on the other end. So it wasn't like I had always
Mm.
envisioned this male. There was a vision of me getting married and wearing this outfit. So I wanted all that, but there was nobody. There was just nobody else, and there was no one to talk to or ask about, and that ended up, I think, being really, really harmful. And looking back, I'm just like, hey, you know what? You can do, like, it's okay. There's just all different people who want all different things, and they're all okay.
Yeah. I know y'all can't see me, like a lot of people can't see me, but I'm like super tearful right now because I'm just so proud of you. And I'm so sorry that you didn't have that representation normalized for you. Um, because I know that we haven't even begun to talk about your story, but you didn't have to go through all the pain that you went through. And that just, it kills my heart. And I know that you're one person. You're one person, and I hope that people who are listening today hear your story and they understand they don't have to wait this long to come out and be true to who they are, because they're not alone. And we as a collective, there's many of us who love you and want you here today. We want you to live. We want you to be here and to share who you are with a level of authenticity that can be accepted unconditionally. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get like emotional like this so early on in this, but it's just, whew, girl, you have been through it. And I think it's because I know you so deeply on a personal level in another way, where I'm envisioning the Ty that I met, this girl that was getting ready for a show, acting in her glory, just a happy-go-lucky person who had her own little flair, and I just thought you were the most charming person on earth. Like, I would have never known that you were going through as much as you were going through. And just as I hear you talk about like fashion choices, right? Like dressing very conservatively. And I know that was something y'all even like teased me a little bit back in college for how conservative I was.
We sure did.
So to think about that, it just, all of this adds such new light and new perspective. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, what did this look like for you during college? I guess moving from New York to North Carolina is huge. That is a huge culture shock. And I can appreciate both sides of this, in the sense of, I moved from North Carolina to Massachusetts, and that rocked my world. But then I returned to North Carolina for a period of time thereafter, and it was stunning, shocking, overwhelming, and a lot of different things. So I'm just wondering, like, what was that transition like for you to come down to North Carolina, where we went to undergrad, for you to be exposed to a new world, essentially, where we went to a very liberal arts schools. So I felt that people were more open and accepting at that school. But what was your experience like?
Yeah, so I knew when I started looking for colleges that my family was considering moving down south. So it was kind of one of those, don't stay in New York to only be close to us. If that's really where you want to be, then be there. But I knew this was on the table. And someone who I consider family and love dearly recommended UNCG, just was like, go check it out. They have a great arts program. And I did, and I fell in love with the blue skies in Carolina, and there's green grass and these gorgeous brick buildings. I mean, it was like your epitome
What's
of a
not to love?
college campus. Come on. I mean, compared to a lot of the gray dark that's in New York, that is just kind of, that's New York. So fell in love and was like, here we go, let's do it. And I don't feel like it took too long to feel like an other. And I think I always growing up felt like the weird kid, the odd kid. And I even recently went through some old photos and I was like, oh, you weren't weird. Like you were so obviously gay. Like you weren't, like just looking at some of the outfit choices and the things, I'm like, oh my gosh, when you can look back at it at a different lens. But I always felt other. But then I also felt safe and had space in New York because there is more fashion avant-garde clothes. You know, we would travel into New York City pretty frequently. I really genuinely loved just fashion and using clothing for expression. Then came here and that felt too much. Like a shirt with these big sleeves felt too much. It felt too big, too loud. I know Lindsay would pick on me just like everybody else with how quickly I walked. I walked too fast. And it was slow down. How fast?
I'm
you
sorry.
walk
Can we
fast?
take a full stop there? You walk faster than Lindsay?
I don't know. Maybe there were a lot of people like, whoa, it probably was maybe like a, wow, okay, let's do this. But often, right, it was a too much, too big, too loud. I had going down the culture route, right? It was August. I am primarily Hispanic, Puerto Rican. That just, those features are the strongest. So I was tan and had multiple people, mainly males, asking just, what are you? In the way that it's not okay to ask. And so I just kind of was starting to get this message of like, this is not your bubble, your world. Homesickness, you know, just kind of really was missing. I think I flew back every other month. I was on a plane a lot that first year. And I think I lost that sense of self. And I think that's where some of the just really like whitewashing, for lack of a better word, like I just started losing that color, some of that joy.
Yes. And I saw that. I mean, I saw that because that's actually kind of how Lauren and I grew apart from one another. Because she was shifting into the space of fitting in with another group. And in the meantime, I was kind of out living in my own little world.
Which I wish I could have been there if I could go back. Lindsay, I'd come over there with you.
We would have had so much fun had we hung out a little bit longer. But we did grow apart during that time.
Yeah.
But you went through so much. Like now I know about this in hindsight, of course. I open the floor for you to share what you feel comfortable sharing, but how did things change and evolve?
So I went back to New York in between. I was able to intern in New York City, which was great. Just felt back home, came back to school. By like Halloween time, I experienced what I consider more of like a nervous breakdown. It was a really extreme panic attack. And then they continued to follow and ensue after that. And so it was just really navigating that world, trying to understand what was happening, really diving into a really deep depression. That next semester, so spring semester, sophomore year, I was fully enveloped in an eating disorder. I look back now and mentally, I mean, it held everything. It was such a stronghold. The costume department, I was in a touring production all semester. They had to take in my costume a few times. And I think back to the fact that nobody asked, like nobody. Professors, I mean, it was like a conservatory style with 12 of us in this class, in this program, and nobody asked.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Because I know I remember this from a very different lens, but just thinking about that piece of it is really interesting because you're right. In the costume department, you are measuring, you are monitoring, you are seeing this every day, every little change. And that is, holy shit, a whole nother conversation as to why aren't these questions being asked?
For sure, but that's part of what got me out of theater was right. I mean, it goes back to the smaller you are in theater, the better chance you have of getting on screen, of getting roles. Like that's just that world and that culture, that it's really not looked frowned upon to experience an eating disorder if the end result was good. I was still functioning.
Well,
I was performing so well in the show. And so finally my parents were like, hey, you want to come home for a little while and maybe like just be home, just consider
resets.
leaving that school. Yeah. And so I finally was like, okay, I can't do this culture of theater. Let's go home. And, you know, I think they did the best they could. This was a wild world. And I hope I will never understand what it's like to have a child in such a dark place, who also can put on a smile pretty well. I mean, I was an acting major. I mean, I did that for a long time, and that's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to put on the happy face. If I was quiet in high school, it was, why are you so quiet? Everything's supposed to be wonderful. That's just
a
the way
Disney
it is
movie,
and the way
right?
it was. Yes, right?
Disney, everything's supposed to be like Disney. And
Exactly.
honestly, you on the outside, you fit that mold. And I will say, I remember our friend group, we did check in with each other and ask, like, what's going on, or how can we support you? And I'm saying this because for listeners, I understand some people hear this and say, well, like, what can we do? What could have been done differently? And a part of me kind of wonders, you know, is there anything that could have been said or done differently that you feel in hindsight would have been helpful, or a more helpful approach when you think back at that time in your life, especially putting yourself as, you know, in the age and mindset of being a teenager and kind of like trying to sort through what you were navigating?
Yeah, I was really grateful to have somebody back in New York that I felt like I could share things with. But I still think one of those professors, just anybody being like, hey, I see you. I see that this isn't okay. Let's talk it out. Or somebody else who maybe had gone through that, to have been able to have had a conversation with somebody. I was so far gone though, and so deep. I don't know if I was ready or could have heard, but just knowing that there was somebody there supporting and seeing me and seeing the pain might have helped. And again, right, I had experiences back to like 5th and 6th grade of same-sex attraction or just interest or thoughts. So all of that is wrapped up in shame, and my brain, I think, just automatically protected me based on this just normative, and I was not fitting the bubble I was expecting. So my brain went into auto drive without me even realizing it. And there was just shame. I think there was so much shame in so many areas, and this was the only way that I could release
shame
it. So
is a hell of an emotion, and we often,
for real,
you know, shame is so much, there's so much linkage around, you know, trauma and shame, but then of course the behaviors of trying to navigate shame, you know, is none other than through our own means of control or disassociation, whether it's self-harm or eating disorders or becoming incredibly sexually active, you know, whatever the thing is.
Right, exactly.
No, when you don't have control of anything else, you know, you can control your actions and how you process and how you release that. So, I mean, I do think that the work you're doing here and the work that you're doing in your life is helping, one, for you to like process and reflect on what you experienced, what you went through, but also opening up that space for other people who aren't as far along as you to say, oh, wait, I'm not too much. I'm not too big. I'm not too loud. Like, that's not a thing. You are you. You are who you were designed to be, and that is okay. And like, we want to
More than
foster
enough.
that. Like,
Yes.
it is more than
enough.
enough. Yes, it is like, it is perfectly imperfect, exactly as it should be. So I think I'm grateful that you're here, and I share all that. Like, yes, we can. It's hard to not get bogged down in what could I have done differently? What could my friends have done differently? Like, you are doing differently now. Like, you're changing that narrative in this moment.
For sure. And I'm definitely having different conversations with my kids. It's affected and changed, you know, how I raise them, what conversations we have, what language I use around them. And so there were some really dark moments over those years. I mean, even it took me until coming out to really fully shake the eating disorder. So it's pervasive. It does not go away. And I wonder too, like, what if I had that higher level of treatment? So on a previous podcast, you guys talked about eating disorders and not ticking all the boxes so you don't get the certain level of care. I did not tick the boxes that would have gotten me or flagged me for a higher level of care.
That's right.
Mentally, I 100% needed every ounce of a higher level of care.
Yes.
And I wonder too, like,
But you
would
weren't
we then have
sick
gone
enough.
down? I was not sick enough. And so in my
Enough.
head, I also thought, I'm fine, I'm good. We can keep
Sure.
going.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Die trying, right? I mean,
right, I mean,
that's just
exactly.
it. Is that's just it. Is that there's so many elements to all of this that that I honestly I did say to Ty before we started this, like, I really would like to do a part 2 where we dive into so many extras in this conversation, because there's so much here that I know we have yet to even like scratch the surface on. But another part of this, whenever we talk about beliefs and how our views of self or our traditions, our values, and what we're raised around in terms of going by the book, that drives a lot of behaviors and the narrative that we're replaying in our head. So, even in the scope of religious views, and something I remember is that you were raised Catholic, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right? And I kind of always associated Catholicism with you and kind of how you identified as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was raised Catholic. My parents helped teach, but they were so open and understanding that there was this, dichotomy there.
Yeah, they're fabulous.
But love them.
I love your parents.
I was like, wait, you mean there were good people? Yay.
I mean, yes, they still are. They're still around. They still are.
Oh, yeah. They are good people. Yay.
Yes. People should hear that. Like, you came from a very loving, supportive family, and it's not like, and so I think that's also a huge piece, because I know in this podcast, we do talk a lot about childhood traumas and how this plays out, but not everyone has to have some profound childhood trauma to experience a really hard adolescence and teen years, because identity development and the construction of identity is just, it's hard as shit, man. Like, you're exploring so much, and your brain's not even fully developed yet.
That was the biggest thing. Was recently with my current therapist, we looked back when I finally came out and really was like sitting in my authentic self. We were like, oh, because we could not figure out, there was no trauma to trigger any of these things. We're like, oh, there's that connection. Like,
wait, I know.
Wait a minute. You have the whole world telling you are wrong, and there's something fundamentally wrong with you. Well, your brain tried to compensate.
Right. That's why I was kind of like poking about like the religious piece, because I feel that's where a lot of it does start, when there's the absence of childhood trauma, but it's just like this inherent view of worth through the eyes of God, quote unquote.
And it wasn't even that strong. I think it was just it was all the messages together, right? So you're told you should want Prince Charming. You're not seeing any representation on TV and media. You are then having a religious push of, this is not okay, this is wrong, this is bad, you are going to hell is a big part of the story.
And scary. And right? That's a lot of fear.
Intense, right? Yeah.
Right.
Super intense. And it just went against, because I had friends, by college, I had friends that were part of the LGBTQ community out. And I just was like, but I don't think there's anything wrong with them. Like, I think they're wonderful human beings. Like, this doesn't make sense. So I left the church for a while. Can I stop for a minute? Yes.
At that point in your life, and I'm going to take us off trail a minute. So you said, I think they are wonderful human beings. At that point in your life, were you still identifying as not they, like as not part of that community?
No. So I have only fully identified about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
That went, okay, wait, you're not straight. What does this mean?
Like I'm not this, but I'm not that. And I'm like,
but I don't know what am I? Like, now I have to dive in. And that was like I was locked in this box, right? And all of a sudden somebody just like opened it up, was like, hey, we can make this box different. We can make it round. We can make it a triangle. We can make it an amoeba. Like,
it could be polka dotted.
Guess what?
Why does it have to be a box?
Exactly. So like, that opened my eyes, and then I got to explore. But really, up until then, I truly thought all girls thought the things I thought. All girls felt the way. There was this song, I Kissed a Boy and I Hated It. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my first kiss with a boy, I thought that was the grossest thing ever.
In the meantime, I was sorry, I'm thinking about when that song came out. In the meantime, I was kissing girls and I liked it.
I mean, but I just
Perry.
didn't know. I didn't know. And people are like, but you were manipulating, or there was something. I was like,
Oh,
no, like I literally, I know
Yeah.
now. I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, so many
Like,
signs
oh, it
were
makes so much
obvious.
sense. But that also
Yeah.
further adds to the I'm too much, but I'm not enough. Like I'm not gay enough. I'm not,
Yes, yes.
So that's like a whole new struggle within. So bless. I mean,
For
whew.
sure.
I keep going
A
back
lot.
to this, and I'm just like, girl, I wish I could have just like snatched you under my wing.
100% Lindsay would be the one to do it.
But I'm so glad that you are where you are today. And
Yeah.
it's like, I just holy shit. Just like so much stuff has happened because hello, you have kids. So we haven't even touched on the fact, like, yes, you have your own biological children, which means what happened? Right?
She kissed a boy and she kind of liked it.
I liked it enough. He was my best friend. I mean, we're still super close.
Yeah.
But like, right. So it goes back to like, there's one, I tried anything to fit the mold of the American dream. I tried anything. I changed myself. I changed my views on things. I thought that was compromising for a relationship, right? You're supposed to compromise and that makes it work. But I compromised literally my authenticity to make myself fit. You get that? I know. I
get that. That's part 2 of this podcast.
It's crazy how you can do that. And right, like the thought that I could have a best friend of the opposite sex, like, and not get married, he must be it. A friend reminded me that on my wedding day, I was like, I get to marry my best friend. Like there wasn't this super romantic love of my life. It was
I
my
get
best
it.
friend. Like,
yeah, I get that.
That's what it is. So
yeah.
So there was always
that feels
there.
safe, right? That feels safe initially in terms of I'm comfortable and it's familiar, and therefore this is what I'm supposed to do.
And there's love. There was and still is love for him. Like that was never not there. I think I've just now realized I couldn't love him fully, and he deserves to be loved on a level that I just cannot offer him. But he deserves that just as much as I deserve to experience a love that he couldn't give me. But we both just needed that and to be better people. But yeah, we were together, married almost 10 years, just shy.
Wow.
So this was not any new thing.
Right. And I'm just thinking like, oh, a year and a half ago. And then I remember something that you had mentioned previously, pre-recording, which is Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed.
Good one.
I cannot help but to ask, like, did you read the book and then you piece like you pieced it all together, or was it like the opposite? Can you kind of touch on like where the aha moment came about? Where were the epiphanies on all this? Yeah, especially so 10 years of marriage. I mean, like that's nothing to,
right to poo-poo. So we were struggling, I think, both with our own things. So it just felt like we could never quite match up. I mean, living almost kind of just separate, and we would come together sometimes and have that deep friendship and that fun. And it was like, oh, okay, like we can find our way back here. And then we would kind of separate. So things weren't ideal to begin with, but there was all this hype around Glennon Doyle's book Untamed. And I was like, there is no way a book is that good. Like, this is ridiculous hype. I must dive in. It's my world. Like, it's something I would be into. So I listen to a lot of books on Audible while I run, and I wasn't even all the way through the book. And I remember being like, oh shit. Like, oh my gosh, was the best way. And I remember texting a close friend, and I didn't say anything else. I just was like, so much of this book is resonating with me. And I did not expect that. And I love, though, just the way that she speaks to empowering women in general of your happiness also matters. You can also ask for what you want. You can also make changes that seem crazy, right? Like, I didn't have a husband who harmed me. There was no abuse. Like we built a pretty good life together. But something was off. I now know. But and then you go back to like social media, movies, film, things like that, right? It's typically the woman isn't happy in the marriage, or fakes it in the bedroom, or the man has his man cave, right? Like, this is just kind of that pervasive thought. So I genuinely thought this is
normal. This is okay. This is acceptable. Like, this is it.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
definitely agree with that because it reinforces that idea of married singles. I
yeah.
don't know if you've ever heard that terminology before, but um, I know in a lot of faith-based marriage counseling, they will acknowledge this space of married singles where you are married but single, like you feel
Hmm.
single in your marriage because you're each living
Hmm.
your own lives, you're spaced out living your own thing, but there's really no connection.
Mm.
um
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I kept, those were the words that were going through my
Hmm.
mind whenever you were describing the 10 years of having a best friend but not really being connected in the way that y'all were both needing.
Right.
In
And I
my
mean, at
mind, I
this point,
pictured roommates, right? Like somebody you care about,
yeah,
somebody you enjoy being with, but like there's the other stuff is missing.
right.
That heart filling, cup
Yeah,
filling stuff.
And to be
exactly.
fair, I think what you're saying too is like you don't know what you don't know. And so
Yeah.
perhaps
Hmm.
while listening to this book, maybe it was like that aha moment, like, oh,
It was, and it was an, oh, you're not living like a great life, right? I'm listening to it, and this is in the middle of the pandemic, right? This was only like a year and a half ago. I had this newborn. I was just, I think like many people contemplating, what am I doing with my life? Like,
Mm.
life is so short. What am I doing? Is this a life I'd like? And so that always stuck with me throughout it all. But the way she talks about Abby and some of her thoughts and stuff, and I just all of a sudden was like, oh, okay, wait a minute. And then got flooded with so many memories, like I said, that were just like so clear now. I mean, like ridiculously clear. I was like, oh, now what does that mean though? Because I am in a committed relationship. I do have 2 children at this point. Like, am I bi? And this just means that I ended up with a man, and that's my story. And
hmm
um, but I remember June last year being uh it just hurt my heart a little bit that I couldn't participate in any pride moments. At least I felt I couldn't. I see that
Mm.
completely different now, that
Yes.
no
Sure.
matter what pride is for you, pride is 100% whether you are
Yeah.
out, whether you are not, whether you're out with some or not.
Or
But
just an
back then
ally
I
as well. I mean,
Yes.
exactly.
yes, yes. But I can absolutely see what you're saying though, because it's like then you might be at risk of being found out, so to speak. I
Or
think
you're not
some,
enough and you're not allowed. Like,
That was probably a big one too, of where do I fit in all this? Um, and how do you have that conversation to even start to come out after being like, while being married for 10 years with kid, like I just wasn't ready. I was still trying to figure so much out. And then through the course of the rest of the year, I all the I never said anything out loud. Like I just kept processing it in my head. Went on a trip in the fall with some girlfriends, some wine drinking, hanging out, and I said it out loud just as a like, hey, I think this is where I'm going next. Like, I don't know what's happening.
so you said like, hey, I think I'm gay, or
yeah,
hey, I think I'm like, what
you
did
can't
I
skip
want to hear
those.
more about
Yes.
this? Like
You
we're not
can't
gonna
skip the
just skip over
details.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of was like,
Thank you, Amber.
I think
You're
I want to,
welcome.
I think I just said, I was like, I think I really want to be with a woman, and I think I need to separate. Like, I think, eh, and they are
Okay.
incredible, and I adore them all, because the first person's response was, okay, so what? Like, okay,
She
what
said,
does
do
that
the
look
damn
like?
thing.
Yeah,
Like,
but just
yes.
of like, let's explore it, like talk it out. So
Yes.
what?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. What does
and
that
then
look
another
like?
friend on the way back, right, was like, okay, let's all talk about what are we excited to go back to. Trying to be, focused on the good as we're leaving our
Holy
girls'
cow.
weekend.
As you're like returning to your husband after, like, wow,
Well, I
that's
I
huge.
sat in the back seat, and I couldn't think of anything that I was excited about going back to. And I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, even without any of the sexuality piece, like this is
Yeah.
this means something.
This
Like,
is heavy.
okay.
This is,
Yeah.
because you can't, that's just it, right? When you get to that space, you can't unknow what you know. You can't unsee what you've seen. So there's no going
Yes.
back. There's like a point of no return. There is no going back. Once you
Mhm.
oh, sorry, this applies to so many things. And my brain's like, boo, boo, boo. But it's like, once you see the thing and you're able to label it, and it just is like that light bulb moment goes off, that's it. There's no going back. And I think that's the grief process. That's the excitement, the fear, the nervousness is just like, okay, I can't unknow this. Now I have to make a decision.
And yet I still negotiated with myself, right? Like
you
this
did.
still felt so big, and still negotiating of like, well, it's okay. Like you're in this marriage, you can still be bi. Like it's okay. I listened to Adele's album. Of course, 30 came out in the middle of all of this.
You had all the things.
Her Oprah special, all the like things just kind of being like, oh.
Can you tell us about that special, by the way? Like why that resonated with you, just for those that don't know about Adele or
yes.
Oprah show?
So she, So she came out with her album 30, which is all written during her divorce. Similar thing. She just realized she wasn't happy. There was nothing major, no big incident that happened. She just wasn't happy. And I was like, oh, you can be a woman and just not happy and leave a marriage and a kid. Like, oh my gosh, like, okay, talk about representation. So going back, right? Like,
yes,
those are two people I saw that were doing this. And she just really spoke about that, sang the song. So that was really good. I downloaded TikTok very quickly, found myself on lesbian TikTok. Because
I think we're all there.
Right? I downloaded it for work humor. You should. It's so good.
It's hilarious.
So good over there. Come join us.
5 out of 5 stars.
So
5 out of 5 stars. Yes.
I saw other people who also were married with kids.
Yes.
Coming to this realization, living their authentic life. Like, so I had to see that representation. And then by New Year's Eve, I'm like, this is so cliche. But I was like, I can't imagine my life not being with a woman and just not being authentic. And it coming out, and it is so focused on sexuality, right? Because that just is the way our world is. That's just the way it is. It is a million things beyond who you want to kiss. It is your expression of your clothes and your fashion. It's your expression of your music. It's your expression of just being you. It is so much more than, we'll just go kiss a girl and have a phase. Like, it's just a phase. Like, it's just wild. And it's not a choice, and it's not a phase. Like, it just, it is who you are. And it's this expression.
It is a valid lifestyle. It is a valid love style. It is a valid,
we don't say this
about
about
your present. Like, it's just who you are.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, we don't say this about heterosexual couples, right? Like, would we ever, for heterosexual couples, say like, oh, it's about the sex? Like, oh, okay, let's just talk about the sex, because we know that with hetero couples, it's always all about the sex. And it's like, seriously? Like, that's a bold-faced lie as well. There's so much more to heterosexual people than just sex. So it's like, why is our society constantly going just to sex whenever it comes to anyone that's outside of that bubble? It's just, it makes no sense. So yes, 100% agree with you.
Because our tiny brains can't process it.
We've also been, how much has been thrown at us and showed with this compulsory heteronormative just narrative that gets told to us. It is hard for our brains to think outside. But I think, coming out and the questions of like, well, how do you know? I'm like, do you ask like a 10-year-old how they know they want somebody or a girlfriend or a boyfriend of the opposite sex? Like, we don't bat an eye at that.
Right.
But if a 10-year-old was like, I want a girl, I want a girlfriend, like, we would have all the questions, and they're too young and there's no way they could know, or all of that. I'm like, but we don't ask that. Like, I know I shouldn't have to explain myself in that sense. And yet that's the expectation.
Yes. When it goes down to our societal norm, where if it is what is expected or what is normal or what is most consistent, we just blindly accept it and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. But if it is different than the norm, even ever so slightly, then we have all the questions. And I think you hit on so many points of what we see in television and what we see on Facebook, because like social media in general, I know we talk about social media a lot and it is very good in some ways, but I'm going to say, like, the majority of what I see folks posting are heterosexual couples. There's this trend to like withhold if you are same sex, like, oh, I can't post a picture kissing. I can't post a picture cuddling. I can't do these things. It's going to make somebody feel some kind of way. You know what? Bump it. Make them feel some kind of way, because that's ridiculous. You deserve to have your adorable kissing photo and like cuddle sessions. All of that stuff is so valid, and we need the representation. And yes, I'm on a soapbox, Lindsey.
Yes,
But-
I love it. I'm not dissing it.
But it's like, I see it, and I have so many close friends. I have friends in every demographic of time, space, and relationship. But my heart hurts when you feel like you can't be proud and confident in your relationship because you're worried about making some old crotchety person uncomfortable.
Yeah,
And that's just the way it is.
Fuck that noise.
I have two kids books that I got that I adore. And I've been reading it to my kids, but one is The Prince and the Knight. And the prince is looking for love. No girl is right. He slays a dragon with this knight. The knight takes off the helmet. They instantly fall in love. They get married. The king and queen are so happy he found his person. And it's the knight and the prince. And that's the kind of representation that like just makes you shift and be like, oh, okay. And then there's one called All Moms, and there's so many wonderful representation parts of that. But one in particular is these two moms helping a little kid with the boo-boo. And one mom looks, for lack of a better word, right, cis, or a straight woman. She does not appear what you would think of stereotypical member of the LGBT community. And I'm like, what would have happened if I read that book? Like, if I could have seen this couple that just, they're with their two kiddos, they're helping the boo-boo, like, so yeah, man, that just matters, is seeing that, and people seeing friends and others. And I appreciate, it's one of my son's favorite books, by the way, is he asked for the mommy book, which I love. But I just, and it's just simple things like that can add that representation.
Yes,
Absolutely.
And I think it's also important to note, and I know that you kind of alluded to this, but your husband, while you are navigating a divorce, he has been really supportive throughout this entire process, as far as you've shared. And I think that's also another huge part of this, is the fact that, the fact that you're able to step into who you are and then have these people all around you say, we support you. Like, keep coming out, keep blossoming.
And I'm really fortunate. I mean, and I recognize that other people do not have this experience with family and friends and people they know. I think it's still a lot for many, many people. My husband is supportive. That friendship and that love, as I mentioned, was always there, and it still is there. And I'm so grateful to him supporting this journey. I think for many others, this is a shift for them. This isn't like, they haven't been in my head, in my experience, in my heart all these years, to know that this is nothing new. This isn't, that I felt more authentic at a Pride event this weekend, and just a genuine joy to be around a community, and the freedom to express myself is something that I will never forget, and a joy and a gratitude to now have that. But they can't, they're not all a part of that. So it's taking and not only are we dealing with coming out, we're also dealing with a separation that is logistically and emotionally, it's a challenge. So either would be hard to navigate, and let's do them both now at the same time.
Rip the Band-Aid off, friend.
Yes.
Let's do it. Let's do it all.
There's a both and. There is both, and y'all are still supporting each other.
Yes.
And
there respectfully, oh, go ahead, Lindsey. I'm sorry.
No, it's just, you can feel both, sad and supportive.
Yes.
In the same breath. And I feel like that's completely valid to kind of navigate all of those emotions, all the waves. Divorce is not easy. I don't care how nice y'all are to each other. It is. But it's still, so I certainly don't want to minimize that. But I think it's amazing that for your children, though, they are now going to grow up where there is representation, and they are going to be able to see what co-parenting looks like with an element of love. And and I can tell you there are many heterosexual families or couples who have gone through divorce where they simply cannot co-parent.
Right.
And so I think that you are breaking barriers all over the place, and I'm just so proud of you to shine the light on yourself and to show people who you are. And how empowering, right, to go to this Pride event and now here you are a few days later coming on What the Fox podcast.
I ran into somebody at a conference, right? Lots of Zoom for a while, actually saw them in person, and we kind of work colleague, similar type relationship. But she said to me, she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're glowing." And I'm like, you know what? When you step in, like, your authentic life, and it's just wild, the things
you're
that
no
happen
longer
and the
dulling
way.
your light. You are no longer dulling your light. Like, you have cleaned the windows and now the light gets to shine freely.
I mean, it is a total Dorothy coming over the rainbow. I'm coming back into my light, and I feel the lightness and the hope and love and joy and excitement. And I feel like I'm living more than I have for years. And I'm just grateful, like, to have all that. And I don't want anybody, I want someone to know that they have a safe person. I had some safe people throughout the time that I did feel like I could talk to at different moments, especially this last year and a half. I had a few people, and I'm grateful to them. And so I think by staying silent, I'm perpetuating the need to be silent, to lessen oneself, to not post the sweet couple picture because that might make others. Right. And I don't want to perpetuate any of that.
Right.
Pride is not just about pushing it in front of people. It is literally being proud of who you are.
That's right.
At the core, who you are as a person on this earth.
Yes.
Which is where again, now that we're kind of in the space of wrapping up today's episode, I still want to read this quote one more time because it's just so powerful, but especially after hearing those words that you just shared. When we recover loudly, we keep others from dying quietly. I just feel like that is so incredibly powerful. And I like to even add in, when we recover loudly and proudly,
I love it.
We keep others from dying quietly. I'm just amazed by your growth. And I have seen your spark come back. And so even I remember kind of seeing the photos and your new fashionista stuff coming back. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the Ty I remember. But like, obviously, whenever I say Ty, I'm thinking about the New York Broadway girl. It's like I'm seeing these flares of your personality come back, but in full force and more empowered and like soul filled. And it's just, yes, it's just so beautiful to see. And I can't wait to see you in person.
I know.
I lots of yelling and talking. To be a tag along. I request to be a tag along. I do not want to be left behind.
Come to the beach, Amber. Come on.
Yep. It's happening. P.S.
It's happening. Oh, okay. I want to say, and I didn't share this earlier, but it speaks volumes that you are taking the time to share this, that you're taking the time to not only in your community, in your safe space, in your like immediate circle to create that awareness and create that representation, but to do it for the broader community as well. Because like you said, not everybody has a supportive network. Not everybody has mom and dad who are like, you know what? Yes, we'll figure it out. Like, we love you. There are far too many people who don't have that. And also moms and dads out there, stop that shit. And two, like, it's okay to have the representation of moms and dads that do support their kids. I mean, spoiler alert, like, that's what we're supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. Right. And speaking of, I would love also for us to, in the show notes, we will definitely include some resources, just in terms
and those books.
Yes. The books that you had mentioned. I definitely want to include some resources there because there are a lot more online resources thanks to the pandemic. For any of my regulars who are listening in Massachusetts, I just want to give a shout out to a wonderful organization called GSA Link. LINK, and it was founded by a mother who whose child identified as being trans, and she developed an entire organization in Massachusetts that has just been profound. It's a mentorship program for ages 5 and up, and it's a very, very special program, and I hope to see other states kind of model what she has created to bring it over to their state. So just a quick little plug there.
Awesome. I mean, we could go down another rabbit hole around gender identity and conforming. I mean, like there's so much to talk about. We could go down.
Okay, so episode 2, 3, 4. How many times are you coming back, Lauren? Because I'm here for it.
You know what? When there's full representation, like,
yes,
that's when I'll be quiet. It's gonna be a while.
Right. So you're gonna keep talking for a hot second. Cool.
It's gonna be a while.
Keep it up. Yes.
All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning into What the Fox podcast. And listen, if you guys love Lauren's story, please share with us your thoughts about this episode. Please follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, whatever it is that you guys use. And just talk to us about it. Talk to us about how this episode has impacted your perception of things, whether it be your own story or someone that you know and love. I think it's important for Lauren to see that she has made a difference, and there's always a ripple effect when we use our voice. So thank you, Lauren, for coming into our audience. We will see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
And we all sing, everything is gonna be just fine. It's gonna fall into place. The sun is gonna set on your terrible day.